trying to do away with here is false reporting for CPS or turning into the state child abuse when it's not a case. There's a ton of incidents that are turned in that are really false claims. Right now, there's just not a good punishment for that.
Republican Representative Heather Scott was the co-presenter of legislation that hopes to put more teeth in Idaho's law that punishes people for reporting cases of abuse or neglect to Child Protective Services. Right now, it's just a civil punishment, monetary, $2,500 or actual damages and attorney fees, whichever is more. Representative Scott wants to add a $1,000 fine to that, or 3 months in jail, or both. And as you heard, she claims there needs to be stiffer punishment because there's a ton of incidents, as she says, that are turned in that are really false claims. And we wanted to know if this was true. And according to Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, where Child and Family Services lives, they had 23,131 calls of child abuse, neglect, or abandonment last year. Okay, so when they get a call, a social worker will take information from a reporting party, like what happened, who was involved. They want details. That social worker will then talk to their supervisor to see if this call is worth turning into a screened in one, that is, a screened in report or not, something they will look into further possibly. And they base that decision on certain criteria, like how definitive is this report? Have we heard something about this before? Does it meet the definition of what they usually respond? And if it does, well, they require a respond. They are required to respond within 72 hours. Some of those responses are immediate, like if a child is in imminent danger, in which case they respond with police. And in fact, most responses are done with police since most calls are about criminal child abuse. And 23,000 referrals, that is a decent amount, as you can imagine. And of those, 9,303 were assigned for safety assessment, meaning 40% of their calls that came in, they sounded legitimate enough, and they sent somebody out to see what was going on. And of those 23,000 calls, only about 1,200 led to a child being brought into care. Now, that doesn't mean the others weren't legitimate. It just means sometimes a relative helps out and they can kind of move in and make sure that child remains safe. They're not out there to take kids away from families. They're just to make sure that kids are safe and cared for. So does that mean there's a ton of incidents turned in that are really false claims, as Representative Scott said, and then repeated by co-presenter Republican Senator Scott Herndon? We asked the administrator of DHW's Family and Community Services.
There are just under 24,000 reports to CPS every year in the state of Idaho. After investigation by CPS usually finds over 80% of those to be unsubstantiated.
That's correct. The majority of referrals that come into us don't end up being substantiated.
When you say unsubstantiated, some people go, oh, false reports. You're saying those aren't the same thing?
No, they're not. The unsubstantiated just means that that we didn't find abuse and neglect or abandonment. It doesn't mean that people are reporting with bad faith.
What about false reports, like intentional false reports? Is that a problem?
It can be, and we don't keep track of false reports because what we do is we go out and we see if the child's in danger or not. We don't go out and see if the person was meaning to give a false report. We're focused on the safety of the child, not really on proving the motive of the person who made the report.
Gilliland did say there have been cases where divorcing parents may call in claiming abuse on each other. And he said it can get to the point where it's clear it's not in good faith. And usually lawyers or the police will tell them to just knock it off. That's what they say. So in order for there to be punishment handed down, as described in Idaho's reporting in bad faith law, the $2,500 or the damages plus attorney's fees, well, somebody would have to take them to court in order for that to happen. So how often does that happen?
And we actually don't have any knowledge of anybody actually carrying forward with that.
So as far as you know, with this statute of reporting in bad faith, you don't know of any cases that has? So
I've asked the social workers and I've asked our attorneys if they know of any of them, and they have said they haven't encountered any of them that have actually happened. Now that doesn't mean that they don't, because we're not keeping track of, that's a court issue, not a health and welfare issue.
And apparently, not too many other people are keeping track. We asked the court. Well, we actually asked the Ada County prosecutor if there have been any cases in the last year where someone was sued for civil damages under Idaho's bad faith reporting law. They also said they don't track that stat. So we don't know whether false reporting of child abuse or neglect is an actual problem in Idaho in need of stiffer penalties, which makes one wonder why this bill is being considered. What we do know is there are children out there that who are being abused, abandoned, and neglected. And Idaho does have a mandatory reporting law, which says any physician, any resident on a hospital staff, an intern, a nurse, a coroner, a school teacher, daycare personnel, social worker, any other person having a reason to believe a child has been abused, abandoned, or neglected, or who sees that child in a situation which could result in any of those outcomes, you must report that within 24 hours and not worry about whether your report will be proven unsubstantiated.
It is better to report and probably maybe be wrong and have that child protected than to try to do an investigation yourself or not report at all.
To make a report, you can call 211 or the numbers that appear on your screen right now. In the Treasure Valley, it's 208-334-KIDS, 5437. Or statewide, it is toll-free, 855-552-KIDS.